Hello, everybody. It's Kelly Schwartz, and as always, my partner Anna and my wife, and the best part of my life is sitting here to my right, taking notes as always. We want to thank you for jumping online with us tonight. You guys are in for a real treat. I have a longtime friend, Mr. Greag Aden with Aden Leadership, on with us tonight to talk about key principles of leadership. Greg and I go back about 30 years, which we hate to admit how old we are. Uh, Greg and I started together in the same industry. As many of you know, I started right out of college with Marriott Hotels and Resorts. And Greg and I were both shipped off to Washington, D.C., to corporate headquarters of Marriott, where we spent a week of intensive training in leadership, in management, and Marriott philosophy, if you will. Greg at the time was in charge of sales out in, I believe, Palm Springs, Greg?
Yeah.
Or you were at some nice resort, I remember, because I was jealous of that. And I was actually in Denver. And over the years, Greg and I became really good friends. You know, when we were in Washington, both of us were kind of two alpha males and bantering back and forth at each other. And we became good friends. His dad and I became friends, and we used to golf together all the time. I had the pleasure of being out in Palm Springs as a guest of Greg's one time and experienced my first earthquake, sleeping on the couch and the whole house shaking, and thought Greg was up to no good messing with me. But anyway, but Greg, over the years, we've reconnected in the last 5 or 6 years, and I've been following Greg in his Aden leadership, where Greg lectures to key leaders and owners of hotels and hotel chains and many other in the hospitality and service industry, along with some other businesses. So I reached out to Greg and I said, hey, you know, really love the messages you're sending out there. It applies to everyone. And you know, Anna and I, we don't think inside the box. We don't want you just hearing from the dental industry and the dental experts supposedly regurgitating everything. I wanted to share with you from a thought leader in the service industry, as well as what it takes to be a key leader. So I asked Greg to jump on, and Greg, here he is. So I am going to turn it over to you, Greag Aden, and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today and what you do for people, because we are excited to be learning.
Well, thank you. Why I'm here is you. What Kelly didn't mention is we've stayed connected, and it was at a time about 45 or so days ago. I was actually working through a real tough time in my life, and what good friends do, they check in, they say, how are you? And I was humble enough to share what was actually going on. He was courageous enough to lean in. So Kelly, I want to recognize you for being the true man you were back in 1986, and you still are in 2020. So thank you, my friend.
Thanks. You're a good friend.
Hospitality industry is my passion. It has been for many years. 8 years with Marriott, then 5 years in a financial services company where I helped recruit and train CPAs and accountants to be financial planners. That was a wonderful 5-year role. And then I got into franchise sales and development with, at the time, the world's largest hotel company, Intercontinental Hotels Group, and became a pretty prolific development professional, and then got into leadership. And the tail end of my career at IHG, I started to really study not only the distinction between management and leadership, but what makes a good leader a great leader. And I didn't realize it, but it was in my blood the whole time. Kind of like the person who gravitates to the front of the room, whether they're invited or not. So it was kind of a natural space for me. And then something happened where I realized I was getting married, newly adopted son, getting pregnant during the adoption process, training to climb a big mountain, blah, blah, blah. And for the first time in my life, I was overwhelmed. And I realized if I wanted to truly lead myself and my family, I'm going to have to make some significant shifts. So what you're about to hear is not only my story, but what I help others get through on a daily and a weekly, monthly basis. And then, as Kelly alluded to, I work with a variety of organizations around the country. I do focus on hospitality, but I do focus on healthcare and in financial services. And so in front of you is a beautiful quote by a man most of us know. If you read anything about leadership and or productivity, you've probably heard of Stephen Covey. And in brief, leaders choose to be leaders. I'm asked all the time, are they born? Are they created? And yes, I mean, you can say yes to either of them and you're right. But what I like to focus on is you chose to be a leader. You walked to the front of the room, you put your name in the hat, somehow, some way you ended up here. So now the rest of the evening is going to be how do we create better leadership?
Thank you.
If you're into reading at all, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote a beautiful article on integrity. See me afterwards if you're interested in it. It's worth the read. So. Kelly, looks like you might have muted me.
Nope, unmuted you. You're good.
Unmuted. Okay, good. Started to talk about his background and he muted me. I don't blame him. Real leadership. Tom Peters, another good person to study if you're into this kind of stuff, is it's really about bringing others along. You'll hear me say it a few times this evening, but it's not about you. And I know that's kind of sideways of what most people might think about, but in true leadership, it's about bringing others along, and it's about understanding who's following you, why they're following, and how you can make them to be better, more committed, more engaged, more powerful, more profitable followers. Now, you may think that as patients, you may be thinking of that as employees. Yes, all apply. Some of the things we're going to discuss tonight, just in brief, I'm going to get you to understand what the principles are, how you can lead differently. I like to say with confidence and courage. Is there a connection between productivity and culture? Absolutely. And in my world, it all starts and ends with relationships, but in order to get the best relationships in our lives, we need to language different. We need to behave differently, and the end result there would be enhanced relationships.
Greg, in the dental industry, and I'm going to jump in from time to time because everybody knows I never stay quiet.
You bet.
But when it comes to leadership, what are your thoughts on, with everything that's going on in the world, and our dentists are faced with new challenges more than ever before, and everybody talks about returning to normal, and I think in one of our conversations, who the hell wants to go back to being normal, right? We need to lead differently. We need to be paving our own way, and so in that regards, what's intriguing to you in your part of working with leaders and organizations, and how does this go? And I think, leaders blaze the path. And whenever, being from the north, when we'd go snowmobiling and I see these fields wide open snow, I'm tearing across that. I am not following someone else's trail. And I know that's your philosophy, but are you going to be touching on that?
Yeah, and I will touch on everything before the snowmobile, of course, but I would say that today we have an opportunity to lead like we've never led before. Parent like you've never parented before. Love like you've never loved before. And this is not soft, ladies and gentlemen. This is an opportunity to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what can you do different? Now, it's already August. So my real question to the audience, and I hope you have a chance to write this down, is what have you honestly done to become a better leader? What have you done to become a better owner? And because there isn't a new normal. No matter what happens after this is done, there's going to be something else that interrupts our business flow, our relationships, our opportunity to operate profitable businesses. So I don't even know what normal is. Normal to me, Kelly, sounds like someone that's soft, someone that just likes to hang out and run a practice and check in. But if you really want to lean in and create relationships like you've never created them before, this was and will be the best opportunity that I've ever seen, especially in this space. Does that answer your question?
It does, because, one of the challenges, as you know, in our industry is that our doctors and our office managers, they show up and they don't have the privilege of being able to work on the business. Because from 9 to 5, they're in the mouth and they're working in the business. That, they're not working, they're not producing, right? And so they're facing some challenges of how do we find the time, the energy, the passion that it takes, to lead. And I'm hoping you're going to drop a bunch of knowledge. I know we got 2 parts on this, but that's the challenges our doctors face. I mean, today they worked an 8-hour day or longer. They've been swamped in their gear and their PPE, and they haven't had dinner yet. Some are driving home and listening on their car. Some are at home. how do they find the energy to do this, and what are some things they can do?
Well, the pure fact that you believe someone is listening to this, recording it, focusing on maybe going back through some things, and the great people never stop working. And I would say productivity is netted down to just a few things. One, it's what is your plan, what is your intention, and how do you measure success? And productivity, in my opinion, also starts with calendaring. You have to calendar everything. And do you calendar to set up a time to be engaged with someone in your workforce or in your office? Sure, you can do that. Just in between Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith's mouth. I don't know, but at some point, the people around you need to know that you care about them and you're the best leader that they have right now.
So in our industry, we have a morning muster, morning huddle, as goes back to our old days. But we get together for 10 to 15 minutes, not to solve all the problems in the world, but to solve what are we going to do to make today as least problems as possible and celebrate what we did well. And we should be having monthly meetings to communicate how well we're doing and where do we want to go. And I look like month to month, like a marathon checkpoint, right? Yeah. Where are we? Are we on pace? What do we have to do to pick up, slow down? What do we need to do?
We're going to touch a little bit on the cycle of performance, with focuses all about productivity, and that's kind of what this middle section is all about. The culture of your office, the culture of your practice, the culture of your family or your organization, and if there's just three of you, there's just three of you. But at some point, what do you stand for? And what don't you stand for? And what won't you allow? And those are the things you cover in the huddles. How do you set your tone for the month, the beginning of the week? I just had a conversation this afternoon with one of my colleagues, and even as much as I believe all of this and I act on it regularly, Kelly, I still have to reset and say, what am I going to accomplish right now? Yes, it's in my calendar, but it's specifically within that. And projects and tasks, and I mean, with your doctors and their patients, it is difficult because people are late. Your people that work with you aren't always on time, etc. I know there's all sorts of challenges, but I guess keeping an even keel. One of the things I've written on a lot is having patience and being patient, and that's another trait of a good leader. So
it's a good one.
Yeah, let's jump in here, and I promised to talk about the key leadership principles. So here they are. As you can imagine, the one that's at 12 o'clock is integrity. 3 o'clock is accountability, courage, passion, and humility. So there they are. They're introduced. Now, what you see in the middle there is servant leadership. Kelly, the thing that distinguishes me from a lot of leadership coaches is I honestly believe that servant leadership is the best way to approach being a great leader. And by that, I mean serve first, lead second. Greenleaf created this back in the 70s. It's been around a long time, and you'll be amazed how many times people say, yes, I subscribe to that. Now, there's all sorts of leadership styles. You can put a one word after leadership, and there you have a new book. But I subscribe in serving first and leading second. And I'll talk about that in a second. First one is integrity. And for me, Kelly, it's simple. It's I am my word, period. It's not just do what you say and say what you do. It's who are you? Who are you relative to your word? And you have to own your word to yourself first. A lot of my clients, I ask them constantly to look in the mirror. So for the doctors that are out there listening, check in before you check in with yourself. Check in with yourself before you check in with your team. And are you ready to lead? Are you in a place of integrity? And here's another distinction you asked me to lay some nuggets out there, Kelly. Here's the first one. If you cannot honor your word as a human being, as a man or a woman or a leader, clean it up as soon as you can. Yeah. You're not going to melt. You're not going to fall down if you say, I'm sorry. But what we don't want in this days and age is follow up, I'm sorry, with, there was traffic, my spouse this, my kid this, no, you're late.
Yeah.
Just say you're sorry and get on with business. But if
I've
you're
always,
going, go ahead.
but no, I've always taught my kids, integrity is what you do when no one is looking, right? It's kind of who you are. And having been on the road for so many years, and I've always shared this with my wife, is that if I do something, would it make my wife or my children proud of me? And if it's not, I shouldn't be doing it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because I have this when I'm in front of an audience, I pretend my two boys are there. For those you don't know, I have a 9 and 11-year-old, and I pretend my mom is there. And how I show up in life, I want to be inspiring for my kids, and I want my mom to be proud. Does that sound weak and interesting? Whatever. Judge me all you want.
No.
But I will tell you, some of my best relationships are with the people that I honor the most. And we can't honor everyone, but here's what I'm saying about integrity. And you just said it. You've got to honor yourself first. When no one's looking,
Right.
That's when you look in the mirror. And all I'm asking you to do is check in before you show up. We're going to talk a lot about showing up.
One of the things that is one of Anna and I core values that we try to share with our doctors is when it comes to treatment planning, because there's so many options on what our doctors can do. We've got some amazingly talented doctors, but when it comes down to making a decision, I always ask them, what would you do with this patient if it were your mouth or someone you loved? And if you wouldn't do that on someone you loved, we really shouldn't be recommending it to our patients.
Well, and now you bring up another angle of integrity, and why are you making this recommendation? As you just said, is it for the comfort and the care and the healing of a patient? Or is it because if you do this treatment, you receive more reimbursement? And I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Fair place to leave it.
Yeah. Leadership principle number 2 is accountability. And Kelly, this one's funny because everybody says, of course I'm integral, of course I'm accountable. Well, here's this true story. You like holding others accountable, but you're not very good. We are not very good, Kelly, at holding ourselves accountable. And
especially as business owners.
Because we have built-in excuses. We think everybody needs to do exactly what we do. We're the owner, we're the leader, we're the dad, we're the mom. Big deal. But when it's time to really grade yourself as an owner and a leader, how are you doing? And there's a lot of noise out there. And one of my favorite phrases is, what else do you want to talk about?
Right.
And this is one of my favorite topics because I want leaders, and I believe the great ones, Kelly, they are responsible for all. And what I mean by that is their thoughts, their words, and their actions. And we never do anything that we don't think about doing first. Now, you can say we acted without thinking, yes, but ultimately we thought from our belief. And that could come from a fear or love, but bottom line is if we think before we speak and we look at our beliefs before we act, less people would get injured, less people would get harmed, less people would feel unappreciated, and we would be better leaders, period, irrefutable. Now,
Greg, I know you put this presentation just for us, and I haven't seen it, but with that and what triggered in my mind, and I'm sure in doctors, any one of you who are on here, you can go into the private chat and send a message and I'll read that question over to Greg. But one of the things that I'm thinking, and we've got an amen in the chat to what you just said, but Greg, one of the things I'm thinking is if we're going to be a leader, we've got to have clear-cut message to our team so we know what standards we're going to hold them accountable to, correct?
Absolutely. And you said message to them. This is a great time to take a little sidebar. It's messages from them. The greatest leaders on the planet, Kelly, ask questions. They're curious. They're interested. They're not just interesting. And again, let's put a little relationship bow on this conversation. If you're meeting someone for the first time and all they want to talk about is themselves, probably like I was when you and I met back in '86.
Yeah.
And you're no, you're not.
We were bad.
My point is, we want to make the other person feel like they're being heard, and we're interested in listening to them instead of coming off as the most interesting person on the planet. So there's that. take credit and accountability. Here's again what separates the good ones from the great ones. The credit goes to the staff. The credit goes to the team. The credit goes to your kids. And when something goes wrong, take accountability for it. You take ownership of it as the owner and the leader. Of course you should. Well, why do I say give the credit or take the credit and give it to someone else? Is because that's how they show up differently for you next time. Because if they work their you-know-what off, they're in the office when you go home, or they're working on something while you're not, and all of a sudden somebody gives you an attaboy or a prize, or you're written up in the journal for it, and all you say is, I, the other person's thinking, I made him, I made her, and they don't even recognize me. So
give the credit and take the heat, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Simply said, well said. One of my favorite, and we part 2 will talk a lot about courage and the communication and the courageous conversation, but it's not about being courageous and arrogant and cocky and nothing. I'm not afraid of anything. Courage for me in this principle means simply you want to have the courageous, the real conversations, the courage to ask questions that no one else is asking. And that's what endures people to you over and over and over. The courage to listen when no one else is. So it's not about not being afraid. It's about stepping into relationship. The conversation is really important. And this is what's going on all over the world as we speak. These people are not having courageous conversation. They're not even communicating. They're together. They're a connection, but there is no connection. There's no courage here. There's no conversation going on. And this right here should be the old normal. If there's one thing I'd like to see is when you go out, and these guys could be planning a vacation. I don't know, Kelly, but chances are that's not what's going on.
That's America's dinner table today.
It is. And this is kind of neat because it's is this made for COVID because they're 6 feet apart, but obviously they're having a courageous conversation. It looks like the one on the left is giving it to the person on the right. But in general, at least they're communicating. At least they're recognizing one another, and who knows, maybe the next slide, the person on the left is leaning back and the person on the right is leaning in. But the question is, are you willing to really have courageous conversations? Because when you are, and when you do, your whole world will shift. I had a conversation this afternoon with a client of mine, and she was talking about how she is feeling elevated or at a new vibration with some of the things that we're working on. And a couple of the friends that she mentioned that to were kind of thinking, that's weird, that's odd, that's goofy. And the other 2 really understood it. So if you're courageous with your word and you have conversations that lift people up, people will follow you. And they'll even join you at that higher elevation, that higher vibration. It's all based on how you want to show up.
I think this is going to be one of the biggest challenges in our professions right now, in the sense that, our doctors have been beat up. They were beat up pretty hard. They're getting beat up by insurance companies and participation, non-participation. Then they're being beat up with the whole COVID and being shut down and their staff and safety. And, I challenge you as a doctor or anyone on this call that's a leader to go back and ask yourself, why did I get into this? And what difference do I want to make going forward? Because if you're not passionate, it's going to be really different. You got to, and I think this is the tied to what you're saying, Greg, you got to have the courage to show up,
Well, you chose this. I chose this. Everyone on the phone chose what they're doing for a particular reason. And I guess my lean in here is, it's not just to be passionate and raw. It's about being passionate towards a vision. And to own a dental practice takes a lot of work. To hire you to get better takes a lot of work. To have someone like you to lean on to make sure that their passion is leading them towards the vision they set out, whether it's patience, whether it's care, whether it's profitability, whether it's notoriety, I don't know, not my business. But at some point, everyone on the phone was a little kid, a little boy, a little girl, and they were pretending they were going to be a dentist or a doctor or a pilot or whatever. And all I ask is follow the vision that you have and do it with passion, and people will follow you. No one's going to follow someone grumpy unless you're paying them a boatload of money and they just putting up with you for a period of time. And then when you're not looking, they're going somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, Simon Sinek says it's very well, passion alone won't cut it. For passion to survive, it needs structure. And this is what you do, Kelly. You help these doctors in these practices create a structure around communication, about measuring the right things. What does success look like? The little things done repeatedly give you great results. I've seen the data that you put together for these practices, and it's frankly off the charts. And without that measurement and without that passion for what it is they're doing, they won't spend the time, money, and the energy to measure it. So
right.
You give them, and they give you a why and a how and how to work together. So again, it's just one of the principles that we can focus on. Here's one that's difficult, and you can imagine it's difficult as just watching TV today and watching some of the political races and watching some of the you-know-who's talk about the other you-know-who's. And I'm thinking, how can we not be humble at a time like this? But let's focus on the practice. When you show up and your humility is nowhere to be found, people are going to just either not listen, not behave in a way that's responsive to you as a leader, because you're showing up selfish. And humility means that it's not always about you. And I'd ask the group that you've assembled tonight, Kelly, to think back real quick. When is the first time you ate your first piece of humble pie? When were you truly humbled? When did you fall off that proverbial horse? And you had to get yourself up, dust off, and say, wow, I did not see that coming. But by being humble and staying humble and living with this principle of humility, you always keep your head up and your heart open so you see where other people are coming from. Yes, it sounds a lot like empathy. Empathy and humility, in my opinion, are next door neighbors. Again,
you know, when this whole COVID shutdown started a couple months ago, Anna and I had our first real taste of humility. As an expert, we pride ourselves on knowing how to help our clients with everything that comes into the office, and how to handle staff, how to handle scheduling, how to handle problems in the dental office. But we had to humiliate ourselves when people were asking, what are we going to do? What about this? What about PPE? What about PPP? What about shutdown? What about, and there was honestly, you know, everybody was quick to fire off what they thought, but we went online and just said, look, guys, this is a first for us as well. What I do know is we will figure it out, but there's no way you can know some of the things that are still to come, right? And you have to be able to admit what you don't know. And I think in this one, and it's a real tough one, you're absolutely right. I told Anna, I said, I've never said I don't know this much in 25 years as I did in the last 10 days. Because anyone who's saying I know how to run an office in this environment, they've never been there before. There's a lot of foundation though, and I think this is what you're saying is, if you go back to your core values of who you are, what you believe in, and you train your team, that's the common ground that we have to stand on. And if we treat our patients right, we treat our team right, we focus on our basic goals and maybe even raise that bar, that humility is we will get through it. We might fumble, we might fail, but we're going to get there. Is that the kind of humility you're talking about, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you and I first met, we were in my opinion, one of the best industries on the planet, because it really touches everybody's life. Everybody, well, maybe not as much today when as far as travel, but staying on the road and getting taken care of. And what we learned way back when is, if you don't know, don't make it up. Simply
Right.
say, I'm not sure, but I'll find out. It's the simplest, most powerful response. And that's not to be lazy. That's actually to be a servant leader, to say, I will go and find out for you.
So you bring up a good point that I teach a lot, is that the most unprofessional answer you can really give somebody is, I don't know. You know, how long before this breaks? How much is this going to cost? How much will my insurance cover? So the response that we are prepared for is, Greag, that's a great question. Let me check with my experts. Let me do my homework and I'll get back with you. I don't have to tell you I don't know. I want to give you that professional response that's an excellent question. Let me do my homework, because most people don't want an answer right now. Would you agree they want just the right answer?
They want to be heard. They
Right.
want to be seen. They want to be appreciated. They want to be respected. And you probably said, well, yes, you just described my patients. No, I'm describing everybody in your path, everybody that's in front of you, everybody's behind you as a leader. Those are the people on your team. Absolutely, Kelly. We want to make sure that our concern, our complaint, our comment is heard. And then when you say, I'll get back to you, the only thing I'd add is, when do you expect to get back to them so they don't have to ask that question? Because I'm checking out tomorrow, I need, whatever it is. And in your case, the patients aren't there very long. They're there for a treatment and they want information. So the follow-up and the follow-through, yeah, you can imagine that's important. That's critical.
So Greag, I don't know if this is on point, but I just got a text from somebody, or a chat, private chat, but where are you seeing the most growth with clients and why? Is this the right place to answer that question?
Yeah, actually, let me actually go right here, because it's actually a great question for this particular section. Where I'm seeing the most growth, Kelly, is when people own their stuff. They realize that if they don't own their stuff and they continue to play as if, or act as if they've got it all figured out, then they have no courage to have real conversations. They have no humility about focusing on everybody else. And this is the most powerful thing a leader can do oftentimes. Raise their hand and say, I need help. I'm not sure. What do you guys think we should do? And anybody worth their salt is going to ask questions and ask for help, so the team can hear a leader say, let's do this together. But he doesn't have to, or she doesn't have to appear weak. In fact, it's powerful to be vulnerable. And if you know anything about Brene Brown, I love her and what she stands for relative to courage and vulnerability. Where I've seen the most growth is to admit to yourself first, you need a little help. And it could be right in front of you, and it could be with one of your staff members.
And this is part of why I've asked you to step on today. I mean, my teams and my doctors have heard me talk about a lot of this, and it's always good to have another expert add a little validity to it. And I know you're one of the leaders in this area. So, so courage and humility are the two biggest challenges.
They struggle with this. One, because everybody says, yes, I'm integral. Yes, I'm accountable. Oh my God, I love being a dentist. Okay, well, thank you. That's 3 out of 5. That's 60%. But if you can do these other 2 very well, and it's hard to be humble. It really is. But it takes practice. It takes practice to put other people first, and then courage we've kind of talked about. And again, courage for me is having the desire, the interest, the intrigue to have a conversation by asking questions.
Okay.
Kind of a neat little segue here. Whether you like the words discipline and love or not, let's just pretend that one is a firm way of leading, and one would be a soft way of leading. But there's nothing, and if you struggle as a business owner with discipline and love, then let me ask you to put your parenting hat on just for a second. Because if you've gotten 37 minutes into this and you haven't said to yourself tonight or many times before, there's an incredible correlation between parenting and leadership. But back to leadership for a second. We don't want to manage. We stopped managing people in the 70s and the 80s. You and I strive to be in management. We didn't even know what leadership was.
Yeah.
But today, if you're managing with a little bit of love, a little bit of discipline, good luck to you. Now, if you're ruling, you have way too much discipline and not enough love. And the last time I wanted to be a ruler was never. And we had rulers back in the day, but let's pretend that's not sexy either. And then if you have too much love and not enough discipline, then you're a pleaser. And people say, oh, I just want to take care of them. I just want to take care of them. Well, are you going to pick up their room when they're in college too? No. Are you going to do their job for you when you're paying them? And now back to your work. So people really then fall in love with this. Well, I'll just kind of hang out in the middle. I'll be supportive. Well, what does that mean? So what I coach and what I ask people to do, and there's a great book, by the way, it's written by John Eads, and it's called Building the Best. And in fact, John's going to be sharing the stage with me in a big leadership conference in Denver on the 19th of November. But if you want to read a really good leadership book, there it is right there. It's called Building the Best. It's 8 principles to elevate those around you. And he does a great job on this particular graph here about it's the right amount of discipline, the right amount of love, and your true focus as a leader, ladies and gentlemen, is to elevate everybody around you. And if you do that, kids included, you're preparing them for tomorrow, meaning next week or next month or next year as employees. But as children growing up, we're preparing them to be independent and successful. And when they look back, they're going to say, where did I learn all this? And they give you credit. And when you're not around, they're going to give you credit. And in my opinion, that's why we're here. And I love the question I asked, and here it is illustrated a little bit more. Support, good. I'll give you a 70% or a C on that one, maybe a B minus. But if you want to really be a great leader, focus on elevating everyone around you. So.
Now, Greag, I've seen you try to be a ruler, and it's usually in some sort of competition or sports.
Yeah, well, I'm competitive, but I tell you, and with all kidding aside, Kelly, being a father, especially at a later age, I started when I was 48. Now they're 9 and 11. I'll let you guys do the math. They have humbled me, but they've also helped me understand why I'm doing what I'm doing is so critical. And I'm not saying I have the most important job on the earth. All I'm saying is leadership is the most important responsibility we have in this country, period. And whether you're an R or a D, I'll let you decide what's going on there. But leadership is desperately lacking in this country. And anyway, that's what tonight's all about. And part of it is we don't focus on this right here. We don't focus on how are we really showing up. And I don't mean buttoned up. I don't mean dressed to the nines. I don't mean polished shoes. Those are things that you just do because you know how to show up that way. I mean from your heart, from your soul.
Greag, I'm getting a private text here. The question is from one of my doctors. How do we sustain good or great leadership, in your opinion, with all that we have going on and all the things we have to do? How do you stay a good leader?
That's a big question. I mean, sustainability is consistency. And again, if you're going to get upset at every little thing that's going on, you're going to scare people, you're going to frustrate people, they're not going to be great employees. But if you have patience and you stay patient as often as possible and you don't overreact, the simple answer is consistency. Show up the same way all the time. And when something goes wrong, if they see you panic, they're going to panic. And ask yourself, is this something we need to address right now? Then it becomes urgent. If not, put it on the important list and take care of it like you would anything else. But a short answer is it's the people that do the little things over and over and over, and they get the best results. That's the answer.
I heard Mike Ditka do a lecture, and someone asked him, how do you motivate your players? And his response just floored me. He said, I don't motivate people to do anything. That's their decision. But what I can teach you are the habits of my most successful players. What are their workout routines? What are their drills? What are their diets? What are they doing on a daily basis? I can't motivate you to get up in the morning on time. You've got to do that yourself. And when you talk about how are you showing up, are you walking in? You know, I talk to people all the time. I use Zig Ziglar. You know, every morning you need to check up from the neck up, and about attitude. And we ask our doctors all the time, and all of them will attest to this. Are you Tigger or are you Eeyore? Right? And no one wants to be with, oh boy, it's another day today, you know?
You know, it's funny you just brought up something that again I've written on a lot. It's victim versus owner, and maybe I'll rename it Eeyore versus Tiger. But it's the man and the woman, it's the human being that owns their stuff. I've already said that. But every time you walk in, people know you're bringing your A game,
Yeah.
but you're not faking. None of this. I haven't used the word authentic yet, but I will right now. Everything we've talked about has got to come from a place of honesty. You've got to be authentic with everything that you do all the time. And people know. And so that's why this is a big slide for me. We have a decision to make, as you just alluded to, when we come to practice, when we come to work as an owner. How are we showing up? How are we being perceived, frankly? And I have a whole another workshop on that. This visual here kind of gives you an idea of one of my biggest philosophies, and that is how you do show up affects those around you immensely. How you serve, guide, elevate, whatever your leadership words are, has an immense impact on those around you. And as you can see, as the arrows go out, not only those closest to you are going to feel how you're showing up as leader, but those around them are going to be impacted. And especially as an owner of a dental practice, you've got the ability to, and you know these numbers better than I, Kelly, but you've got X amount of people in your practice. What is that, 10 to 12 people that work there? And how many patients on an annualized basis?
Right.
And how you show up in their life affects them when they come home, when they come back. And as leaders, we don't recognize how profound of an impact we really have. And sometimes we get so caught up in what people think, we forget about how we're really showing up for people. And not everybody knows who this guy is. John Wooden, one of the winningest coaches in college basketball, and he won 10 championships in 12 years. But it wasn't about winning. It was about how he developed the young men in his years. And he always has said, it's not about what other people think. That's your reputation. That he wants us to figure out who we know we are, and that's our character. So thought I'd throw that in because a lot of us are focused on what we look like and not how we're showing up. And you show up with character. And you always consistently show up that way, and that's how you'll be a better leader going forward. Kelly, do you have any questions or thoughts or things you want to add?
I've got a question from Dr. Jones. What do you do to keep sharp, or how he put it is, how do you sharpen the saw in your field?
In my field, I actually have a coach. And I'd be a hypocrite if I told you that I've got it all figured out. I've read the books, I've got the certifications, and I'm good. Just look at me. No, I'm constantly working on who I'm being and how I'm serving others, how I'm leading in circles of, I surround myself with accountability partners all the time.
Yeah, Anna and I have a coach as well.
You've got to. I don't know anything else about it. And there's always somebody that you can connect with to help you stay accountable. But yeah, it's a constant process.
You know, you're talking about how you show up on the previous slide and the how it affects those around you. And the visual that went into my head is Tiger Woods. When you watch him step into the tee box, his focus, his drive, his determination, he doesn't get off course at all. And you can see how everybody who plays around with Tiger generally either elevates their game to compete or they fall apart out of fear. But he's not following what other people are doing. And if you ever watch him, what I love is whether he hit the longest shot or the shortest, he's walking in front. Mm-hmm. He doesn't follow anyone from tee to box to tee box. He's the first out of that gate and going. And that was what made me think about when you show up, you know, how are you leading? And, you know, the average practice has over 2,500 patients that they see twice a year. You know, they impact those. Those patients tell others. Every time, you know, I used to joke, one of our good friends in the Marriott industry, you know, one day he showed up with a terrible attitude and it was kind of going on for about a week. So I knew some stuff was going on, but he had such a big impact on everybody in the hotel. And one day he came in just a terrible mood. After about the 6th day, I went up and put my arm around him. I said, you know, Mark, I am so glad you're in a shitty mood, because now all of us can be too. And it really changed his attitude about how what leaders do impact your team. So when our doctors walk in the door at the morning huddle, or when you're throughout your day, if you're losing it, your team are going to walk on eggshells. They're going to lose it around your patients. You know, inspect what you expect, and you have to be that leader of that, no matter how hard it is. And there is a reason, doctors, that your team work for you, not the other way around. And they do look for you for these things, as Greg's sharing with us.
Well, I would add to that, then you have an opportunity to transition from home to office. Whether you're talking about going from your bedroom to your basement, or your bedroom to your office in your own home, before you approach any other human being that day, as a leader, check in and make sure that you're in a position to be the best leader you can possibly be. No different than when you have a blank day at work and you come home, you slam the door, and your kids are happy to see you, and you haven't transitioned yet. It works both ways.
Yeah.
Don't leave it. I mean, leave it where it belongs. And that rear view mirror, the side view mirror, the front, whatever mirror you want, one thing I'd like to leave with the audience is get comfortable looking in the mirror and having a short conversation with that person, because typically that person won't lie to you.
Well, one thing, it's interesting you say that, because one thing I talk about is we don't drive as a leader looking in the rearview mirror. We look in the windshield. What's ahead? What's past we can't change. And one of my secrets along those lines about transition, before I get ready to go on stage, be it a speaking engagement, be it in a Zoom meeting, be it walking into one of our team's office, a lot of times, I put on one of these songs that just kind of pump me up and raise the energy. Sometimes it's just Anna, motivating me and talking, and sometimes it's saying a prayer, whatever it may be. But there's always that transition process, And again, one of those things from the doctor's standpoint, this is really important in the sense that, your patients now can't come in and sit in your reception area. It should be a reception area, not a waiting room. They're
Right.
in their car. We've got to transition the patient into our practice. And if you're coming at them the wrong way or with the wrong attitude, no one's going to listen when you're talking at them. You got to be asking questions with them and about them, because no one cares about how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
And that's a lot of what Greg's paraphrasing here that's so important. But we want to make sure that that's going on, right?
Yes, and I wanted to address that sustainability question a little bit, because if you are not learning from your past mistakes and you're not owning them, I'm not asking you to carry them around, but what you learned from what did not work, own that and be honest about it, and just tell yourself that you can and you will do better. I guess a little teaser for part 2. We're going to talk about the cycle of performance, and it starts with alignment. And as you can see, an office in disarray, an organization in disarray, or people that are not on the same page, they're certainly going in the right direction, but they're not aligned. And so there's a lot of wasted time, money, and energy, and you might have the right people on the bus, but they're not working together. So we're definitely going to address that next time. As I mentioned, it's cycle of performance, and I'll show you a slide here. And in closing, Kelly, I wanted to kind of talk about the who you're being, or how you're showing up, just a little bit to wrap this up. Think about how you're languaging. What is your language? Are you talking to people? Are you talking with people? Are you asking questions? Are you pointing your finger? Are you setting agreements? Are you telling them what's expected? And you can sit there and say, hey, as an owner, as a doctor, whatever, as a leader, it's my right to point my finger and tell them what's expected. Okay, how's that working for you? But if you ask people what it is we're going to accomplish this week, and we're all on board, now they don't get to tell you how much money the practice makes. I'm simply saying is the relationships will be much more powerful if you behave in a way that's servant leader like. And how do you do that? Well, you start by serving others around you. You guide them to do the right things all the time. And like I mentioned, you elevate them. And by doing that, you'll have an impact and an influence and a huge inspiration, not on those people that are just around your heart, but everyone that's connected to your entire universe. And if you don't believe me, well, see me afterwards, because it's completely changed my world. Completely changed my world.
So Greg, somebody put on here, and it's funny, I got the book right here. How do you get someone to even read leadership books? I've given away the Energy Bus leadership book to 3 different employees, and none have read it yet. So when I give away books, and a lot of times for graduation presents, when my kids were in high school, I gave away a lot, The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
And about 3/4 of the way through the book, in red pen near the top, really bold, I'll put, see me for your $200 gift card. And so if they actually read the book, they got the $200 gift card in addition to the book. If they only read the book or didn't read the book, which is the case, and you've heard probably hundreds of stories about that, but
sure,
in terms of getting your team to read, and again, to ask some team members to do something off the clock may be a challenge. Instead, what you might consider doing is during staff meetings, study a chapter, let teams know that you're going to go over this chapter, like a book club on a week-to-week, month-to-month, or morning huddle may give your team some incentive to do that. You may do some sort of contest, first 3 that are done, and whatever you may want to do. There's a lot of different ways to go about that, but that's what we've done.
Let me add to that. And again, it's in the spirit of huddles. I've got a client here in Denver. It's a nationally renowned hospital, and I'm working with some very intelligent people. They just don't know how to lead, or they didn't know how to lead. They do now. And part of the challenges were they were responsible for leading or guiding a lot of people. And their huddles didn't always include everybody, but they had disdain almost for huddles, because they felt like, other than checking in with what patient is what room, and from a medical standpoint, what else do you want to talk about? So what I encourage them to do is stop doing all the talking. Remind people in the huddles that we're all in this together. So tomorrow, Kelly, you're going to be talking about this point. I want you to research this and bring it into the huddle. Julie, you've got Wednesday, so on and so forth. So now the leader gets to watch other people show up. Now, sometimes they get a little nervous because they're not used to it, but after a while, everybody's showing up, everybody's being elevated, and everyone around them is being elevated. So just something else to do in your practices, doctors, if you're listening, is ask others to lead. Don't assign it just by pointing, but encourage them to lead. Encourage them to read something and bring it back into the circle, and so other people can grow.
So Greg, I know we're wrapping up on your time, and you've given us a lot, and we're going to do a second part, but if someone had questions or wanted to reach out to you between now and our next class, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, on the screen in front of you is my email. It's simple. It's Greag at Aden Leadership. And although I live in Denver, I still have a Texas phone number. It's 469-879-8211. And I'll answer any question anybody has about anything.
Okay.
That's just how I roll. Kelly, I can't tell you how much I've appreciated the opportunity to serve you and your team. Would love to do more. And like I said, we've got one coming up, and we're going to focus more on communication, productivity, and the cycle of performance. It's going to be fun.
Yep. So a couple quick things for everybody who's online. Greg is going to be back with us on September 10th, the same link that you used today. We'll make sure we communicate with you. But also on September 19th, we've got marketing strategist Manal Sampat, and we've got Len Tao with Bird Eye in the Raving Patient. We're going to be doing a morning webinar from 10 a.m. Eastern time until 1. I will be doing a 1-hour presentation. Manal and Len will also be doing an hour. It's going to be great. And if you reach out to me, let me know what else, or reach out to Greg directly, what else you would like us to cover in leadership. But Greg, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for everyone who is on here. We will post today's course on our YouTube page as well as our Facebook page. So you can go to kellyschwartz.com, and there's links to Facebook and to YouTube where you can replay this if you would like. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And Greg and I guess we'll open it up to Q&A. Greg, what I am going to do